All right. Hello. I'm Mr. Wheeler. I'm the high school principal, and we are meeting today for professional development. And so before we begin, I just wanted to just do quick introductions for who is in the meeting today. So I'll just let y'all go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Teresa Britt. I'm a special ed counselor.
I'm Tracy Bryant. I'm an educational diagnostician.
And I'm Christy Coe, and I'm a special education teacher.
Okay, good. So thank you all so much for coming today and for this professional development. What we are going to focus on today is improving our teacher input for our ARD meetings. And we're going to just make sure that we are filling out these forms with fidelity and based on classroom data. And so as a principal, I sit in ARD meetings multiple times a week, and the teachers that are in the ARD report their information, but the teachers that it's not during their conference, they have to send in written reports. And so the ARD looks at that information and has to make a determination for each class what the student needs. During those ARDs, we have determined that sometimes the information being provided is not complete information. Or maybe a teacher may forget to provide documentation. So the purpose of our professional development is to kind of work on this together as a team and look through some sample forms and then just make sure that we all know how to fill out these forms properly and know how to give the ARD committee the information that they need to be successful and make sure the students more so that the student is successful. So first, I did give y'all a copy of the forms we will be looking at. So today, just to kind of overview, we're going to go through 4 different samples. So I've got it in order. So sample number 1. Let me share my screen real quick. See, I'll share my screen. Trying to see. I think, is my screen being shared right now?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. All right. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we are on, let me blow this up right here. So we are on sample number 1. What I want you to do, and this is going to be a collaborative activity. I'm not going to be reading off of a PowerPoint or just making this all about myself. So I'm going to be asking y'all questions. And so that's why I asked y'all to kind of gather together on one computer instead of everyone on a separate computer. We're going to look at sample 1. And then what I want you to do is first, just as we look at it, what do you notice is on the form and what do you notice is missing from the form? So there's multiple sections, and I know we filled this out, but just kind of quickly, I'll give you about maybe just a minute to look at it. Just look at sample number 1, the teacher input for ARD, and then it's 2 pages. It's actually 3 pages. Just look through that, and I'll come back in just a second and y'all can tell me what you see there and then what is not there.
Subject, current grade.
It's missing a lot.
Data, streets.
Is there any behavior questions about behavior?
I can't see anything.
So definitely need something about behavior.
Okay, so I was gonna I'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and talk about this one. So just to kind of let you know, I did white out the email address just for security and also the student's name. So of course we see at the top the email address is missing for the teacher, so that would be required. What was something that y'all found what was actually on the form that should have been on the form?
I have the subject you teach on there as math, but I think like at the high school level, what math are we talking about? Are we talking about algebra? Are we talking about geometry? So I think that they need to be more specific, especially at the older grades. I understand below 8th grade, it would all be math, but if this is an older grade, they would need to be specific on the subject you teach.
Okay, that is a good point. We need to specify what they actually teach, especially at the high school level, because there are a lot of different math courses, specifically Algebra 1, geometry, algebraic reasoning, or Algebra 2. So that would be specific. More specificity would be good. Did y'all see anything else, kind of a comment of something that was either there or something that was missing that should have been on the form?
I like the way you begin with the strengths close to the beginning, so we can talk about the students' strengths and some things that they are doing well in the class.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but we are missing some behavior. We're missing a spot to discuss behaviors. Behaviorally, how's that student doing in class?
Yeah, so y'all both made great points. So we do have academic strength. We do have one academic strength can turn fractions into decimals, percents, and can order real numbers. I like the specificity there. However, we are missing, there is no academic area of need. There may not be an academic area of need, but looking at that grade, he has a 75. And so I would say that if it was close to a 100 average or an A average, I would say that there may not be like a strong area of need, but we can always find something that a student can improve on. But with this student setting at a 75, he's only, five points from failing. So there probably is some kind of area of need. Also, like Ms. Coe said, there's no behavioral information, and that would fall under the extra information about the student. So we may need to look at maybe improving this form by talking about what kind of behaviors, some kind of behaviors you want the committee to know about. Because it kind of is kind of read between the lines. That's what you're wanting there, but it's not really specified.
Something else that when you look at the current grade for the student, it's good to have an overall grade, but it would also be really good to know, is it because homework and assignments are getting completed, so they're getting good grades there, but they're struggling with tests? So then we can kind of tease out, so if it's testing, do we need to look at accommodations, or what is it about tests that the student's struggling with? Is that what's bringing their grade down?
Yeah.
And that's a good point. So at the bottom of page, that second page, classroom and STAR accommodations, there's a check box, small group administration.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's not really specified why that's required or needed.
Right.
And so this form, this is pretty typical of what we receive. It's actually better than some that we have received, because sometimes they won't have, they'll just say they're doing great in my class. But there's no specificity. So there is a little bit, but it's incomplete. So now let's go ahead. So thank y'all for looking over that one. That was just a good first step. So now we're going to go on to sample number 2. And that should be the next one in your packet. It's just another teacher input of an ARD. I would like you to look over this one again, like we just did sample number 1. And then I'll give y'all last time it took y'all about 30 seconds. So I'll give y'all about 30 seconds and we'll discuss this one like we did the first one.
Wow. This one's much better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Information is the
Mhm.
behavior.
all right, so what do y'all think in comparison to sample number two versus sample number one? Do you think this is a better, more completely filled out teacher input form, or, about the same, or what's y'all's thoughts on that?
The teacher did a much better job giving a better picture of the student for sure. I mean, it looks like the same form, but this teacher did a better job.
Yes, and so specifically, can you tell me like one thing that the teacher did a better job of? Ms.
I
Bryant?
like on the academic strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so like on example, the areas of need, it says his reading inventory test result is 697 Lexile, equivalent to mid-third grade proficiency range. So I've found as a diagnostician and looking at these forms, a lot of times they'll just put a bunch of numbers on there and they'll just say Lexile 697. Well, I don't, unless you've taught at that grade and just know what Lexile levels are, I don't know if that's a good Lexile or a bad Lexile to say to the parent, hey, he's doing great in reading, and if you don't have that mid-third grade proficiency range, you may think 697 is on grade
Good
level, so I like the way she put that in there, mid-third grade proficiency range.
Okay, that's really good. And then Miss Britt, did you see anything that
I
stood out
did.
to you?
I like the way that the teacher commented on the behavior the child had, that he needs constant reminders to be on task and ask questions when needed. I like the way the teacher pointed that out in that area.
And then Miss Coe?
Same thing. I feel like that it was more in depth with the amount of the detail on the data. It was definitely more data driven than the previous one. And then it's some additional information about the student's behaviors, what would work well with the student, and then the accommodations. I just felt like it was way more in depth. It gave us a better picture of where a student is academically.
Yes.
Good, so it's a more complete form.
Mhm.
It's completely filled out. There's information, academic strengths and academic weaknesses. So before we do the next task, which we will be filling one of these out together, I just want to go through each part of the teacher input form, and then just kind of make comments. Some areas will be pretty much glossed over because it's pretty self-explanatory and there's no need for improvement overall from based on the data of what I've looked at. But some areas do need to be improved. So before we kind of go into this together, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So so we're back on sample number 2, teacher input for art. So at the very top, I've whited it out for this for confidentiality purposes, because this was an actually filled out form. The student's name would be at the top of this form. So, just for clarification, teachers are receiving these forms approximately 2 weeks before the ARD. So they do have time to fill out the form, looking at their classroom data. And that's kind of the expectation. They're giving that by the diagnosticians, and the special ed department at the high school is able to assist in any way. So it's expected that they do fill out these forms as much information is needed to help the committee make the appropriate educational decision for the student. So looking at section number 1, we see the email. Of course, this is an easy section. Everyone puts in their email address. Just make sure and use your school email address in this section, not your personal email, because it does link it back so we know who has responded, and the diagnosticians, they can send out reminder emails, which they do about a week before. So there's 2 reminders, 1 reminder and 2 total chances for teachers to fill out the form. And so we need to know who's responded and who has not responded. The second section, subject you teach. Again, like Ms. Bryant said, just make sure that you fill out specifically what you teach. So if it is math, if it's algebra 1, say algebra 1, don't just say math,
Right.
Now, if it is a lower level, then that might be okay, but since we are at the high school level, we need to make sure that it's as specific as possible. The next thing is, the next section is the current class grade average in your class. The key word here is current. So whenever you look at your grade book, just make sure that your grades are updated as is required each Monday. So just make sure that you are providing the art committee with the most updated grade and not the last 9-week grade. And we're almost to the second end of the 9 weeks. That's just not going to give us, a fair understanding of how the student is doing in your class, because you're not there to report. So this is your self-report. Looking at the next thing, we're looking at academic information. So this little one here at the bottom, that's just kind of explaining where we can get information from. So what kind of information are we looking at? So we're looking for STAR data, 9-week grades, student classwork, observations, benchmarks, unit tests, portfolios. So we're looking for both formal and informal data sources to determine where the student is doing well and where they're needing some additional support. So looking on the second page of sample number 2, so academic strengths. This is where we just need to make sure that we have specifics for the art committee. So let's just look at this one specifically, and you've already kind of talked about it. But so this is different than sample number 1 because of why. Can you tell me can you tell me one data source that was used for an area of strength on this one?
There was a reading assessment in the class.
Okay, a class reading assessment.
Uh-huh.
Good.
And a phonics
And
inventory.
phonics inventory. Yeah.
Okay, and so we were looking for, and it's saying on the form, please list at least 2 academic strengths. So those could be from the same assessment or from 2 separate assessments. So we have the assessment, and then what did the assessment identify as a strength? You don't have to read it out word for word, but can you just give me a couple of ideas of what the teacher said he was performing well?
Letter names accuracy and sight words accuracy are 2.
Okay.
I think
Good.
those are great for the art committee to know,
And then also looking at figurative language and speaking and correcting abuse of oral grammar, tenses, agreement. So that's important to know, is what is their grammar going into whatever grade is next to where they are.
Good. So, and then also the diagnostician will use that information to update the student's PLAF statement. So that's what drives the whole individual education plan, the IEP. And so this information is critical for both the ARD committee, but also for designing those goals for the student. So now let's look at the next section, which is academic area of need. Again, can you tell me a data source that was used in the academic area of need?
Same data source as that class reading assessment and the beginning of year reading inventory test.
Okay,
So
good.
obviously that gives a good bit of data.
And then what did the teacher determine based on that data was a area of need?
Identifying the main idea of a selection.
Okay. And so we're looking for a main idea. And so if we were to, as an art committee, have to design a goal, might that be an area that we might design as an area for a goal to be written for?
Yes.
Main idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably comprehension, because it says he's a good sight word. His sight word accuracy is good. So he's word calling
No.
because his actual Lexile is mid-3rd grade. So if this is an 8th grade student, then he's good at word call, and so you think he's understanding because he's reading well, but
Good.
he's not comprehending.
Yeah,
So
not reading
I like
well.
that we can use,
they did a good job. Yeah.
And so with us, you know, this is a student that we don't, I picked a student that we didn't have, so that way you could see, based on this, you actually have a pretty good understanding of maybe where the student specific strengths and needs are. And so that's the direction that we need to go with these teacher input forms. It's not just another activity that has to be done, but it's actually critical in making sure that the whole picture for the student is being represented in the art committee meeting. And then the next section, looking at the extra info, which I would like to just kind of say, like Ms. Britt said, this is kind of our de facto behavioral statement section. What do you see? So kind of besides behavior, is there any other maybe things that might be put in that section?
Yeah. I mean, you could put in there, you know, if they have any kind of health problems, they might put something in there about, you know, the student goes to the nurse every day at this time, or anything like that. Just any kind of extra information, you know?
Or that's a great point. Or maybe even like if they have, you know, attendance issues,
Yes.
or, you know, chronic attendance, and you're trying to figure out why they're doing so poorly in that one class. Maybe it's a first period class and they're not showing up till second period. And so, you know, as principal, I would come to the ARD having that data, but it would still be important for the teacher just to kind of show the impact of that absence for the parent and for the committee. I'm looking at the next section, where classroom accommodations and modifications. There's just a little bit of information on there. We're not going to read through that, but looking at STAR accommodations, kind of that, it started page 3 on that.
2 of 4, it's at the bottom of page 2.
Yeah. So we've got classroom and STAR accommodations. So on this one, we have, what accommodations do we have checked?
Small group, administration, oral admin upon request, and extra
Okay.
time, same day.
All right, so these are actually the classroom and also concurrently the STAR accommodations being provided to the student. So in this instance, the teacher believed that the student performed better with a smaller group of students with having the test read to him on request and extra time. Again, we probably need to consider updating this form to have text to speech as a possible choice, just because a lot of testing now is moving online, and I know all of STAR testing is moving online starting this December, and new assessment in April and May for STAR. So that's a pretty straightforward, you know, checkbox based on what the teacher thinks the student needs, but we just need to make sure that that is being filled out. The next section is, if you use accommodations that are not listed, please provide. So this is kind of the supplemental aids, and this is important for the ARD because we don't know specifically what the teachers are using in the meeting, are using in the classroom with their student to be successful, and so what they need on the test. And so for this one, what did the teacher say was additionally needed?
Blank graphic organizer.
Okay, blank graphic organizer.
I've
Go ahead.
Where they just put supplemental aid or math toolbox or something like that, and the teachers need to be reminded that this has to be specific.
Yeah.
If you want a supplemental aid, don't just put supplemental aids. You're gonna have to tell me which one, because when you're filling out the paperwork, and if that teacher, like you said, is not in the room, well, there is 10 to 15 supplemental aids. Which one are you needing? You need to be specific for that child.
Yeah.
So that needs to be a specific.
Okay. So that's the pieces I do want to go over. And let's move on to sample number 3 now. All right, so this time we're going to work together, and we're going to fill this out together. So let me pull up. So I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to get, we have some sample data that I've included. It's behind that sample 3. It's called the sample 3 data set. Y'all see that?
Yes.
So there, the first page, we have the grade book. So we're going to fill this out as if we are the English 1 teacher for this student. So we have the printout from Ascender for gradebook. Just note at the bottom, there is another class at the bottom of that. Just disregard that. We're just going to work on English 1. So let's just start with that page. So I'm going to, can y'all still see my screen? All right, so I'm just going to, let's see if I can fill this out here. Okay. All right, so it won't let me fill out the email form. So I'll just go down to teach. So what should we put in that box for what I teach?
English 1.
Okay. Again, as we talked about earlier, we want to specify, don't just say ELA, but tell us what class. What is the student's current grade, current average in English 1?
86.
Okay. And y'all can see, can y'all see my pointer here? So we see an 86. So there's 2 86s on here. We have to, sometimes those numbers will not be the same. So what the reason why semester 1 up here is actually the 9-week average. This grade right here, the lower one, that's actually the working average. So that's their current average as of today in the class. So what you need to go by is your working average, and that's what I talked about in sample number 2. So we're going to put a 86 in there. Okay, now this is the fun part. So looking at academic strengths, let's move on to the, let's go on to the next page of the sample 3 data set. Okay. Y'all see that? It's a DMAC printout.
Yes.
Okay, so at the top of this, and I had to cut off a little bit of it just for security purposes, but this is, I don't know if you can, how big it is on your screen, but this is the English 1 first 9 weeks test. So this is, and this is the based on the TEKS standards that were tested on this test, where the student performed well and where they didn't perform well. We can see here at the average score, what the student actually scored was a 51 on the assessment. So the student did not pass the assessment. However, they still had areas of strength and areas of weakness on this exam. And so I'm just going to do a little bit of training on this, and then I'll type it in for us on here while we're filling it out. So again, looking at this form, these are all of the tested questions and the tested TEKS areas. So you see the different colors. You see there's green, which means that's a readiness standard. So that's tested each school year on the STAR test. The blue is a supporting standard. Those are rotated and tested on average, every 3 years. But we don't know which ones are going to be tested and which ones are not per year. Those are the two I'm just going to focus on. I'm looking at the bottom, again, level of concern. So when we see, let's start with the red. So if you see a red, something in red over on the right-hand side, you're looking at a question that the student did not pass. They may have gotten, if there was multiple questions in the section, they got less than 70% of those questions correct. So that would be considered an area of weakness. If you see a orange, they made a 70 to 79 on that section. Or if you see a yellow, that's a low risk area. So that's an 80 to a 100% of that they got correct. So that might be considered an area of strength for the student. Now, there are a lot of different areas on here. And as a teacher, you would know specifically probably what to focus on and what not to focus on. Because of the subject matter you teach. But for our purposes, I just want us to identify 2 areas of strength. So we're looking, and we'll do the first one together, and then I'm going to let y'all help me with the second one. So let's look at the readiness. So we're looking at the ones in green, and we want to find one in green that is also a low risk. Okay. So let's look at that and see.
So they analyze non-linear plot development, such as flashbacks, foreshadowing, subplots. They got
Okay.
100%.
All right. So we'll do. Yeah, let me put that in here. So analyze
Linear plot
non-linear
development.
plot development. Okay.
Mhm.
And then what might be another one? That's a
Um,
strength.
And then analyze how authors develop complex characters.
Okay, now we're looking, that's great. Y'all did great on that. So now we're looking for one area of academic need. So we're going to look for a readiness standard that was challenging for the student.
Analyze the author's diction and syntax contribute to the mood, voice, and tone of a text.
Okay, great. Okay, so can you see how using that 9-week assessment specifically helped you to nail down some strengths and needs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and you have multiple sources of data as a teacher, so you can use that along with other assessments, classwork, portfolios, and such. All right, so let's go to the next part. We're just going to have to make this part up because, we don't have the information for behaviors. And so we could just say, for instance, in this one, the student is performing well. So we could just say that the student is
And the students turning in all
completing all work in class. And maybe that'll be good. Students not is completing all work in class. Okay, looking at down at the bottom on that classroom and STAR accommodations. We don't really have enough information to go on off of this form. but based on how the student performed on that exam, what might you think that student might benefit from?
Probably oral admin, either all questions or upon student request. Is what I would think.
Okay,
Maybe upon request, because it seems like he does good on work, daily work, so maybe upon request.
okay, oral admin upon request.
And,
And then also, is there anything else?
it's hard to say,
Maybe
a small group, I'm not sure.
maybe a graphic organizer to help with some of those.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, graphic organizer, so you can kind of organize the information on the mood, voice and tone
Yeah,
to kind of determine.
or a mnemonic device. I'm not
Mhm.
sure what, strategy that teacher uses, but
Okay. All right, so we just completed that activity and we worked through it together. And it took us about 5 minutes. And so, but we really provided a lot of pertinent information in that
Mhm.
short amount of time. And that would improve our practices for this campus by just pulling that DMAC assessment, looking at those TEKS, looking at the grade book, and just keeping a little anecdotal notes as to kind of know if there's any kind of behavioral concerns or anything. Do y'all have any questions about that part?
I don't think so.
Mm-mm.
All right, so now for the final activity, sample number 4. So sample, that's your last page. So I've discussed it, then we've kind of worked on it together. And so now it's y'all's turn to work together as a team and come up to fill out this form based on what we've discussed in the professional development today. So let me just kind of explain. So you've got a teacher input form, a blank form. You also at the bottom, behind that form, you have a similar data set that you had on sample number 3. So you have the gradebook report, and this time instead of English, we're doing algebra. And then we have 2 assessments. We have the Algebra 1 exam, and we have the Algebra 1 pretest. So I'm going to give y'all about 5 minutes to fill this out, and then we'll discuss, and then we'll be finished with our professional development.
So the current grade is an 85. All right. Academic strength was, we look at readiness.
And make sure you find 2 academic strengths. I did throw a little wrench in it just to kind of see how y'all perform.
I'm kind of wondering if on the grade part, if it would be good to have the date on there. This is the grade as of whatever, because, you said sometimes they'll have 2 weeks to fill it out. Well, their grade could change a lot in those 2
Mhm.
weeks. And you say, well, the kid as of this, when they filled this out, had a 30. Well, the parent might freak out, but as of today, they've, had missing assignments that they've made up and all that, and they may have an 80. So I wonder if that would be a beneficial thing to say, as of whatever date that they fill out the form, just somewhere on the form, just, have the date.
I think that would be a great point, because some teachers may fill it out at the beginning of that 2-week time
Yeah.
frame, and some may fill it out the
The
day
day of.
before or the day of when they're reminded again. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a great point.
So we can get 1 academic strength here, solve linear equations in 1 variable.
Yes.
And then I think we need to look over here and maybe look at
one-step equations, they have
Mhm.
distributive property. I mean, they
I was
have
gonna
some
say-
strengths
And
for
just say
sure.
distributive property.
Yeah. I mean, even on the bottom, there's like identify functions,
Mhm.
graphs,
Mhm.
so functional tables. They definitely have some strengths.
Mhm.
Even on the quizzes, horizontal and vertical line equations and vertical line graphs, they've made 100 on both of those quizzes. That's pretty good.
Mhm. Academic area need. Let's see.
Combining like terms, they made a 50.
This one right here, if you look at the DMAC, determine the domain and range of a linear function in mathematical problems. Determine reasonable domain and range values for real world situations, both continuous and discrete represent domain. So how does, which ones of these fit underneath here?
Right. Because even on this one, finding values using graphs, they made a 38. The slope of a graph, they made an 11.
Using. Finding values using what? Graphs. And then slope. Okay. Extra information. I mean, they're pretty good at turning in their assignments. They have 2 missing assignments. May need access to like content mastery.
Yes, especially if they have oral admin upon request, then that teacher in there can help.
Mhm. So small group administration, you think?
If they're going to content, I would think yes.
And oral admin upon request.
Yeah,
Okay. Calculation, always put down calculator.
I'd say they probably, you would use it. I mean, at this age level, they're given the calculator anyway. But I think for college, it's good to, if they use it, then let's go ahead and specify, so that way they know they are allowed to use it.
Where are we with graphic organizers and using these? Is there a graphic organizer? that would
Some
go ahead and
math
do that?
teachers do use them and some of them don't. A lot of them use the blank graphic organizer. Mnemonic devices are usually more for English. So they may need the use of a blank graphic organizer for math. Okay,
Okay, did y'all kind of make it through it?
I think so.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's go over it real quick and then we'll be finished with our professional development today. So, of course, just make sure on the first part, email, you'll fill that out. So on subject you teach, what did y'all determine on that?
We did algebra 1 for the subject that we're teaching.
Perfect, because that's what it was. That's what the sample data was. So that's great. And then the current average, grade average in your class,
85.
okay, an 85. And then looking at the academic strengths. So what did y'all identify, and kind of tell me the process on that? How y'all determine two academic strengths? Because I did throw a wrench in there. So kind of tell me what y'all found out.
Well, we decided to take one academic strength from the DMAC information. And so we looked at the readiness and what they mastered in readiness. And so that was solve linear equations in one variable. And then we looked at grades and found that these students scored very low in distributive properties. And so we chose, they did really well in distributive properties. So we chose that as another academic strength. We wanted to utilize 2 different data sets.
Perfect. And because also as you look, the wrench was that there was just one academic strength on that Algebra 1 assessment. And so that is why I provided an additional data set so you could find a second one. And then what was the area of weakness?
The area of weakness was finding values using graphs.
Okay, good. And then extra information?
We decided that they needed to have access to content mastery because they had really high grades in some areas. And then there was just some that they were pretty low, so having access for reteach, an opportunity for reteach in a smaller environment would be beneficial for the student.
And then classroom accommodations.
Small group administration, oral admin upon request, and calculation aid, basic calculator.
Okay, let me stop sharing my screen real quick. Okay. So thank you all again for coming today for the professional development. And I hope that this did help y'all to understand how to completely fill out these teacher input forms. And we will be following up later just to check and see how this is being done with Fidelity. And y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.